living longer, living healthier, living better than ever before. Welcome to Mountain Pacific's Healthy Living for Life, a weekly series that gives you the information, education, and expert insight you need to become an active participant in today's ever-changing healthcare climate. Here now is today's program host.
Every year, nearly 500,000 people die from smoking cigarettes. Just think about that for a moment. Smoking not only causes cancer, but it can damage almost every organ in your body. Today, we are going to learn about the health impacts of smoking and the resources and tools available to help you, a friend, or loved one finally quit for good. Welcome to Healthy Living for Life, a show dedicated to helping you do just that. I'm your host, Beth Brown. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Joining us this morning is Dr. Douglas Kunzweiler, who is going to talk about the effects smoking has on our bodies and on our health. Thanks so much for being on the show again, Dr. Kunzweiler.
Thank you, Beth. It's good to be here.
So I think everyone realizes that smoking causes cancer, but what exactly is it with smoking? Is it chemicals? Is it the smoke? What causes the cancer exactly?
Well, when you see cigarette smoke, what you're looking at is a tiny particulate matter that comes from the tobacco and from the paper that it's wrapped in. But then there are also literally hundreds of different chemicals that come as gases in the smoke. And most of those chemicals are bad for the body. They are basically poisons. And when they go down in the lung, just like oxygen, they go through the lung right into the bloodstream, then they get carried to every organ in the body. And they have all sorts of different effects. Some of the gases are things like carbon monoxide, formaldehyde, ethylene oxide, very, very bad toxic chemicals. They damage cells, they interfere with the DNA in some cells, they interfere with the body's ability to repair itself, and all those things lead to cancer and the other effects that smoke has on the body.
Okay, and so let's talk about other effects that smoke can have on the body. What about bone health? Can smoking impact your bone health?
It certainly can. Bones are maintained by calcium, and smoke interferes with the body's normal processing of calcium. It makes the body get rid of calcium. When that happens, then the bones become weaker and you develop osteoporosis, which is a weakening and thinning of the bone, and that makes you more susceptible to fractures.
So rheumatoid arthritis, I don't think that's one that necessarily people think of right away when they think of the impacts of smoking. How are rheumatoid arthritis and smoking connected?
Rheumatoid arthritis is when the body forms antibodies to the lining of the joints. It's sort of the body attacking its own joint tissue. And this is what's called an autoimmune disease. We don't know exactly how smoking affects that, but we know that if you smoke, you're more likely to develop rheumatoid arthritis. And we know that if you do develop rheumatoid arthritis, if you smoke, it will be worse. It will be more pronounced. And we think that somehow, again, the smoke interferes with the body's ability to repair itself, and that's how it leads to worsening of the rheumatoid.
Okay, and so does that affect your joints then, or what does rheumatoid arthritis actually do?
It affects the lining of the joints, yeah.
Okay.
So the joints become inflamed, swollen, and actually the tissue starts to break down and the joints become deformed.
Okay, all right, thank you for that. And so then another big one that we know can be a problem, especially when it comes to smoking, is heart health and smoking's impact on your heart. So can you talk specifically about how it's bad for your heart and how it can increase your risks for coronary disease?
Yeah, it affects the heart in a number of ways. We know that smoking causes blood vessels to thicken, and when that happens, they don't carry blood and oxygen as well. And that happens to the coronary arteries that supply the heart muscle. So the heart muscle is working with less oxygen. It has to work harder. We also know that smoking is associated with high blood pressure. When your blood pressure goes up, the heart has to work harder to pump against that higher pressure. And that also weakens the heart and takes a toll on it. And it's also a direct toxin to the heart muscle itself. So there's a whole variety of ways that it affects the heart. So heart attacks are more common, and heart failure, when the heart just isn't able to pump efficiently enough, all those are results of smoking.
Okay, and stroke is also in the mix there. Can you talk a little bit about connections between smoking and stroke?
Yeah, like the heart, blood vessels carry oxygen and blood to the brain. those blood vessels become thickened. And smoking also makes your blood more likely to clot. And so if you have a thickened blood vessel carrying blood to the brain and then it forms a clot, that part of the brain that blood vessel supplies is going to die, and that's what happens in a stroke. Part of your brain basically dies.
Okay, so what is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and can smoking lead to that?
Yeah, smoking is far and away the leading cause of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And what happens is that the smoke and the gases, the toxins in the smoke, destroy lung tissue. And that makes it much more difficult to get air in and out of the lungs. It also makes it harder for oxygen to diffuse across the lung tissue and get into the bloodstream. And so it's very bad for the lungs in many ways.
So we've talked internally as far as heart, lungs, but even smoking impacts where you smoke, which is your mouth, your gums, your teeth. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we know that people who smoke are much more prone to cavities. Smoke dries out the lining of the mouth, and that leads to a greater likelihood of cavities. It also weakens the bone in the jaw, and so that the teeth become loose. And it also causes gum infections and leads to things like cancer of the mouth, cancer of the throat, cancer of the voice box.
And then one last condition we want to talk about is diabetes. Can smoking make diabetes worse?
It can make diabetes worse, and in particular, we know that diabetics are prone to heart disease and narrowing of blood vessels, and smoking accentuates that. So it doesn't necessarily affect the blood sugar directly, but it contributes to worse blood vessel disease and diabetes. So you're more likely to have heart attack, stroke, and troubles with circulation in your hands and your feet.
Okay, we're almost out of time, but if we've caused some of this damage by smoking and then we quit, can that damage be reversed?
Yeah, the real message we want to have people take away is that the minute you quit, things start to get better. So it's never too late to quit smoking. We know that within about a year or so after you quit, your risk of heart attack is about half of what it was while you were smoking. Within about 5 years after you quit, your risk of a stroke is back to baseline, the same as somebody who never smoked. And,
Awesome.
and so as soon as you quit, things start to get better. The body starts to heal itself. And within 10 to 15 years, you'll be back at the same risk you would have if you had never smoked. So it's never too late to quit.
Great, that is good news. Well, thank you very much for all of that information. We do need to pause here for a break, but up next, we'll talk to a member of the American Cancer Society about smoking, so don't go away. We'll continue our conversation right after these messages. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We're talking to Emily Coyle of the American Cancer Society and Nicole Ani from the Montana Department of Public Health and Human Services. Both ladies are here to talk about the impacts of smoking, and thanks so much for being here, ladies.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So, Emily, let's start with you. Can you share some statistics with us about smoking and its negative impacts on our health?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just going to reference my notes to get these numbers right.
Sure.
So we know that from 1965 to about 2012, cigarettes killed more than 20 million Americans,
Wow.
Including 2.5 million non-smokers who were exposed to secondhand smoke. So that's the smoke from other people's cigarettes that killed them, and 100,000 babies. Today, about 34 million adults smoke cigarettes, and about 16 million people live with a smoking-related disease. About 60% of those people are living with COPD, or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. We know there's about 480,000 deaths per year due to cigarette smoking, and 42,000 of those are from secondhand smoke.
Wow.
Nearly 29% of all cancer deaths are related to smoking. And then there's really a huge economic impact as well. There's about $170 billion of healthcare costs due to smoking for adults, and about $156 billion in lost productivity. So that's, if you're you have employees taking a break to go smoke, or if you have to stay home to take care of a sick family member due to bronchitis that they contracted because they're more susceptible due to smoking. But really, that's about $300 billion per year in economic impact due to smoking.
So those are shocking, both to our health and to finances. Nicole, do we find that people in rural areas tend to use tobacco more than people in urban areas?
Yeah, so tobacco use does tend to vary depending on the population, education levels, your income, and also where you're located. So we do tend to see higher rates of tobacco use in rural areas. And pretty consistently, Montana does have higher tobacco use than the national average. And more specifically to a certain type of tobacco product, our smokeless tobacco use rates are always much higher than the national average, and it's actually more than double what the national average is.
Wow.
It's 3.4% for Montana adults who use smokeless tobacco, and that's that's the national stat, and Montana adults who use tobacco, it's 8, so it's more than double.
Okay, so let's keep talking about stats a little bit here, and those numbers are very high, but it seems like less people are smoking these days. Is that true or not true?
It is. So we have seen a decline between 2005 to 2016. We saw about a 5% decline. So from about 21% to just under 16% of adults were smoking over that period of time. And then that reached a historic low of 14% in 2017. So that's
Okay.
a total 67% decline since 1965. So that's terrific. However, among youth, while we are seeing smoking among high school students plummet from about 16% in 2011 to 7.6% in 2016, that's ticked up to about 8.1%, and that also coincides with the increase in e-cigarette use, and that usage has increased about 78% among high school students. But the real numbers here from 65 to 2012, those lower smoking rates have been propelled by all these collective tobacco control efforts that public health has engaged in, health advocacy organizations, state and local policies to promote smoke-free air ordinances, and combined those efforts have saved about 8 million lives from tobacco. Now the average life expectancy has increased overall among people by about 10 years. About a third of those years, so about 3 years, are due to reduced smoking rates.
Awesome. Well, that is good news. So Nicole, maybe I'll come back to you. Is there a difference between traditional tobacco compared to commercial tobacco? What are the differences there?
Yes, there's definitely a difference, and especially for American Indians. Most or many American Indian tribal nations, they actually use traditional tobacco for ceremony, prayer, healing. It's sacred to them. And then we have commercial cigarettes, which are really intended for profit, and they're mostly used habitually and recreationally. And unfortunately, the tobacco industry has been exploiting Native American images and symbols to try to make their products seem less harmful and addict more users. So when we're working with tobacco prevention in Montana, it's really important to recognize the difference between the use of traditional tobacco and commercial tobacco.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've talked about smoking, we've talked about e-cigarettes, and we touched a little bit on chewing tobacco, but can we talk about that a little bit more and how it can cause cancer? Maybe Emma,
Yeah, absolutely. So chewing tobacco, there's about 30 different chemicals, many of which we know cause cancer in chewing tobacco. It can cause cancer in your mouth, in your throat, in your tongue. It can lead to pancreatic cancer. Chewing tobacco is also highly addictive, contains nicotine, and it is a very dangerous drug as well, just like combustible tobacco.
Okay, and you did touch on e-cigarettes a little bit too, but can you talk about some of the dangers that might be there?
Yeah, absolutely. We don't know fully what all the dangers are with e-cigarettes because they're relatively new, but I do know that they can lead to some health issues as well, particularly because they have drugs in them. We don't know entirely what's in the juices. We don't know the long-term effects of these drugs, and that's something that I think the health department is looking into as well.
Right, just to add on to what Emily said about that is that we don't know the long-term health effects, but we do know that e-cigarettes are definitely not safe for youth, young adults, and pregnant women because they tend to contain nicotine, and nicotine is harmful for brain development. So that's something that we're concerned about. And then the U.S. Surgeon General has also found that e-cigarettes can contain heavy metals, they contain ultrafine particles that have been known to lead to cancer and respiratory disease. So it's something that we're very cautious about and just watching the data overall to make sure or to follow the health effects of these products.
Okay, great. All right, ladies, we need to pause for a quick break here, but coming up next, we're going to learn about how smoking cessation resources are out there and available. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. Welcome back. Nicole Ani from the Montana Department of Public Health and Human Services and Emily Coyle of the American Cancer Society are still here talking with us. And now we're going to learn about some resources and tools to help quit. So thanks so much, ladies, for sticking around to talk to us about that. So Nicole, let's start with you. Can you talk to us about some of the different resources for smoking cessation or tobacco cessation that are available with the department?
Absolutely. We are super lucky in Montana to have a really great quit resource in our state, and that's the Montana Tobacco Quit Line. So any Montanan can call into the quit line. They'll get connected into a trained coach who will help them set a quit plan, a quit date. They'll get connected into nicotine replacement therapy like gum, patches, lozenges, also other quit medications like Chantix and bupropion. And their coach is going to really help them through that quit process and making sure that they know what their triggers are for smoking or using tobacco and that they're able to avoid those triggers as they move forward and hopefully have a successful quit overall.
Can anybody take advantage of these resources, or do you have to meet certain criteria?
The only eligibility requirement is that you are a resident of Montana.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. And are the products and resources free?
The coaching and the nicotine replacement therapy, like the gum, patches, lozenge, that's all completely free through the quit line. All you have to do is you have to call, you have to go through the intake, and you actually have to enroll. And once you participate in your first coaching session, that's when you get access to the free nicotine replacement therapy. And I do want to note that also right now we have Chantix for free for 3 months. You can get 3 months of Chantix for free, and then you can also access bupropion, another quit medication.
What about services available to different groups? Like, let's start with Native Americans, for example. Are there special resources out there?
Yes, we actually have 2 specialized programs through our quit line. One is our American Indian Commercial Tobacco Quit Line, and that connects American Indian callers with a dedicated American Indian coach. So they not only get connected to somebody who does recognize that difference between traditional and commercial tobacco, but then they also get access to more coaching calls to help them through the quitting process.
So you've talked about some different tools or medications that are out there, the patch, the gum. How does somebody know if one will work better for him or her than another?
That's such a great question, and I think that's the perfect thing for somebody to talk about with their healthcare provider or their doctor. They can help them determine if they have another health condition going on, if that is in any way contraindicated with nicotine replacement therapy or the quit medication. But they can also talk to their quit coach about it. They do run through some medical questions through the intake to make sure that there aren't any contraindications. So you are in good hands with the quit line, but it's always a good idea to just talk to your healthcare provider, especially if you're embarking on this quit journey. Okay.
And what about e-cigarettes? Are there specific resources for people who are trying to quit e-cigarettes or quit vaping?
Yeah, that's such a good question. The quit line does help with quitting e-cigarettes, and I think it's really important for everybody to understand that e-cigarettes themselves have not been determined to be an effective cessation tool yet. The data is still out on that. What we do know is that people who there are people that do use e-cigarettes to try to help them quit, but a lot of those people are still using cigarettes, so they're called dual users. And then a lot of those people are continuing on to use e-cigarettes in the long term, and since we don't really know the long-term health impacts of using these products, that's a little concerning for public health.
Okay, that's good to know. So you talked a little bit already about the counselors and getting teamed up with a coach. Can you talk about the quit line and the people who answer the phone? Who's on the other end and what is that like?
Yeah, these are people that go through over 200 hours of specialized training to help them through their quit process. And some of them are even former tobacco users themselves that have gone through the quit journey, and they know what you're going through. So they are there to really talk you through it, and they can relate really well.
And these programs are generally successful?
Yeah, we've had enormous success with our tobacco quit line. We have one of the highest success rates in the nation. Our success rate just this last year was 40%. And that doesn't sound very high, but when you compare it to somebody who's quitting completely on their own, their success rate without any counseling or medication or any help is about 5 to 7%. Oh. So we are drastically increasing that success rate by giving you free access to counseling and those quit medications.
Great.
Yeah.
Do you know if outside of Montana there are similar programs available?
Yeah, and I think Emily can add on to this. Every state does have a quit line. So if you are located in a different state, you can go ahead and call 1-800-QUIT-NOW and you'll get directly routed into your state quit line.
Did you want to talk about that, Emily?
Absolutely. And if there's ever any question, the American Cancer Society is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, either through our website, cancer.org, or 1-800-227-2345. And we have a myriad of tobacco cessation resources, research, information, can connect you to your local quit line. We have programs that you can sign up for individually for coaching. We have programs for employers to share with their employees to help promote a smoke-free workplace. Really, there is no shortage of resources for people if they choose to make that life-changing decision.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Great, ladies. Thank you so much. It's important for people to hear about those resources, so thank you.
Thank you.
That's all the time we have. So I'd like to thank you two for being here and thank Dr. Kunzweiler as well for being here. And thank you, as always, for tuning in. We hope to see you again next week. In the meantime, stay fit, stay well, and stay healthy for life with Healthy Living for Life. Have a great week.
Healthy Living for Life is brought to you by Mountain Pacific Quality Health in partnership with AARP Montana. We'd love to hear from you. If you have suggestions for future programs, visit our website at mpqhf.org or call us at 406-443-4020. You can also catch us on YouTube by visiting our website and clicking on the Healthy Living for Life logo. Production facilities provided by Video Express Productions.